Welcome to The Culture Bar, a panel discussion podcast exploring, dissecting, and shedding light on important topics in the arts and music world which matter to you. Hello, I'm Henry Sutherland, and today on The Culture Bar, we are delighted to be joined by Jamie Stone MP. Jamie is a Scottish Liberal Democrat politician here in the UK. He has been a local councillor, a member of the Scottish Parliament, and from 2017, the MP for Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross. Jamie is the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for defence, together with digital, culture, media and sport. What's more, he's a keen gardener and an expert on edible fungi, and I gather he's been known to play a pantomime dame, so we hope to find out more about that later. Jamie, it's great to have you with us. Welcome.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to join you.
Thank you very much. Well, it seems like you're a bit of a polymath. I didn't even mention that you're from a family of cheesemakers as well.
Well, yes, I am actually. My mum and dad, they had a tiny little dairy farm, and then they started to make cheese, which was actually made more money than selling the milk. In fact, they were gradually going broke because we were such a small farm, but it kind of, it saved the family. And my little brother now is a cheesemaker.
Oh,
so,
excellent.
He keeps me supplied if he's feeling generous with a little bit of cheddar now and again. So there we are.
I'm very envious. I'd love to have a sibling as a cheesemaker. So we want to tackle some quite big topics today.
Right.
Brexit, COVID, climate change, diversity, inclusion, culture wars, you name it. And if it's all right, we're just going to dive straight in. So what is perhaps the most pertinent issue in the arts at the moment in the UK is Brexit. And the Liberal Democrats, of course, had a very consistent message on this, one of the few parties that have really, about maintaining a close relationship with the EU. And it appeared in the media last week that the UK government supposedly rejected an offer from the EU to allow musicians to travel without work permits. DCMS have come back quite strongly to rebut that and said actually it was vice versa. So lots of he said, she said. Do you know actually what happened and what's going on to hopefully resolve this?
Well, I don't know what happened, and I know that there's a blame buck being passed backwards and forwards. And yes, we have to get to the bottom of this one day. But what do we know for sure? We know that right now that musicians face huge difficulties getting to perform in Europe. That's a fact, okay? Why? Well, we'll come to that. But we are where we are with this, and it's not good. And I'll tell you why it's not good. Because, firstly, the arts, performing abroad, and let's broaden it out beyond music, into theatre, into all sorts of things. That has been an incredibly strong element of the UK's soft power. There's no two ways about it. Just as the English language is so powerful in a world context, so has the culture associated with the UK been really, really massive. Let me give an example. This is not about Europe, but the fact that I think I'm right in saying Elton John is at the inauguration right now, that just shows how much of a cultural icon he is around the world. Today he's in the United States, but it's the same in France, the same in Spain, wherever. Now, with our performers not being able to perform so easily, there's a real danger, which is that if you're running an event, which, by the way, you have to plan in advance, as often as not well in advance, if you're running an event in Paris and you say, oh, it's such a faff getting these Brits here, tell you what, let's use some German performers or some Italian or wherever, then that habit might stick. Even when we get it sorted out, they say, well, actually, and we could lose trade, which is really, really damaging to the UK, the concept within a global, stage, if you like. So that's one big worry. Also, a little sideline on this, it's actually, as a result of whatever's happened, and we'll try and find out what has happened, it's more difficult for them to take the instruments in because of things like rare metals and so on. That's bonkers too. The government said, oh, well, it's not as simple as that, there are all the set crews and people like that. Well, hang on a minute. Yeah, but also you get solo pianists and solo cellists and so on, whatever. So it's not good. What have I done about it? I wrote to Oliver Dowden, who did, in fairness, say the door is open. And I said, I really would like a meeting with you, with musicians who know what they're talking about, proper meeting. And I then raised it in the Commons at the beginning of this week. And luckily, the answer was yes, okay. We'll give you a meeting. So I'm doing everything I can. Meantime, other MPs are trying to find out what the heck's happened here. Yes, that will be of extraordinary interest, but at the end of the day, I've got to get moving about getting our musicians. And look, one last little point, which is this, is that during the pandemic, the arts, somebody playing the guitar, somebody singing in our opera, a band, whatever, somebody reading a music piece of poetry, the arts have actually kept us sane during the pandemic. We've seen all sorts of stuff happening, and it's very much to the credit of British cultural experts that it's helped so much. And it, without them, life would have been an awful lot more rotten. And therefore, I think we have a debt of gratitude to sort this out as far as humanly possible.
Well, here, and it's great to know of a member of Parliament that's speaking so articulately and also passionately for the cause for the arts. But as you say, it does sound like there's political will from Oliver Dowden's side, which is encouraging. How long do you think this could take to resolve?
Gosh, I hope it's really quick, because it's not, I've talked about the fact that we could lose markets in Europe, but also it's about livelihood. And let me give you an example of, and this is switching slightly to COVID, okay? Mm-hmm. But I chair the Gaps in Support cross-party group, the APPG, which is all about picking up people who have somehow been missed out on help, financial help during the pandemic. And I heard a really sad story directly from a cellist, a professional performer, who, because of COVID, couldn't perform. But she had to live in some way or another. She wasn't getting any money from playing a cello, so she's become a cleaner. I think I'm right in saying it's a school cleaner. But because of the hours she has to spend cleaning, she's not practicing her cello. Therefore, her ability to perform is being impaired. And that is really, really worrying. So linked with all this, I think we want to get things sorted out as soon as possible. I think I'm going to expand the argument a little bit, which is, you just said I do panto or didn't, I became an MP. By the way, that was by accident. I wasn't really supposed to become an MP. My fellow pantomime performers thought it was absolutely hilarious at standing Parliament. Then all of us got a shock when I got elected. But the point is that I think it's actually part of our way of life. And when we talk to each other, we're talking to each other just now, that's communicating, but also you can communicate through laughter, through a beautiful piece of music, through a beautiful picture. So what I'm really saying is the arts are fundamental to our lives and our quality of lives.
I certainly resonate with that, and I'm sure lots of people listening will as well. I mean, I'd like to talk about COVID and funding more generally later, but a Musicians Union survey highlighted the fact that 34% of musicians are considering leaving the industry, and it's tragic. So from the sound of things, it's unclear about how long this will take to resolve. This is the reciprocal arrangement of work permits for musicians. But is it also recognised that as part of our cultural way of life, it's also having European musicians come to the UK as well to make sure that it is reciprocated? Is that something which is on the agenda?
Yeah. You absolutely mentioned the reciprocal arrangement. That was what was so good until Brexit. It worked. You could have a pianist, Andreas Schiff, could come here and play. And you think about the Edinburgh Festival. The Edinburgh Festival, many a famous name from Germany, France, from all over the world would come and perform. And that has been such a good thing for not just for Edinburgh, but for Britain and all over. So I'm really agreeing with you and saying it is horrific. And, some of us, I get accused of being a Ramona. Well, sure, I warned about it and all that and so on. But now we begin to see things actually unraveling following the whatever they signed up to on the 25th, on the Christmas Eve. That's really, really worrying. We see, fish stuff can't get abroad. I understand meat is going on, and we see the arts. So I am a convinced European, and I'm going to digress very slightly for one pretty strong reason, which is that my grandfather's two brothers, they were called Walter Stone and Arthur Stone, were both killed on the Western Front in the First World War. And one thing about the EC, and this is a shameless advert for the EU, is that it's the longest period we've ever had since time began of peace in most of Europe. There's been wars in the Balkans and so on, there's been ugly things, but within the European Union, there's been peace, and there's been, as you say, about artists traveling around, and we learn about each other's cultures, and that's so good. It's so good. I'm a great believer in joining together. I'm working together. I worked in Italy at one point of my life as a school teacher. And that was great. I loved it. And I learned so much about Italy and about Italian and all the rest of it.
Well, absolutely. I think, well, just to finish off one thing on the Brexit element was that it's the frustration, I think, now I'm talking from my day job as I work in managing tours and helping to realise those orchestras, ballet companies, all sorts of different things. But the fact is that Brexit represents more bureaucracy, not less, which has been promised. And it's more regulations, more red tape, more cost. And I suppose what's would be encouraging to know is that also that DCMS are aware of the fact that it's increased bureaucracy. And from the sound of things, I think it's what you were saying about carnets and other elements, which would just make it more challenging. But picking up what you said about internationalism, that obviously seems a very big key value of yours. And just to shift gears slightly, where do you stand on a belief of international cultural exchange, which it sounds like you share, but also a balance between being climate conscious and our responsibility for the environment, particularly when you consider the UK is hosting COP26 later this year?
You say responsibility to the environment?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, but, with people traveling about by air and all that, yeah, sure. If that's what you mean, there's a problem there. But if you think about it, I'm a great railway man. And railways that are powered by electricity are probably the greenest form of travel that's absolutely possible. And trains are getting faster and faster. We see some that are unbelievably quick. And I think that it is possible to balance it. And I think that, with electrical powered crossings of seas to an extent can be done. There's a new ship that is going to use the Bernoulli effect, which is why a golf ball swerves in flight, which is a clever sort of revolving sail, which is probably a very, very green way of crossing the Atlantic. I think maybe that as a world society, we need to realize that in actual fact, the ability to fly to America at some incredible speed, but spraying stuff out all over the upper atmosphere is perhaps not the best thing. But, electrical powered aircraft could well be round the corner, and battery technology is getting much, much cleverer all the time. I'm an optimist on that front. But I'm absolutely sure that the cultural exchange is important. But also, I'm looking into an iPad, and that is where I think that with the technological revolution, that you can do very, very clever things. I had a Zoom meeting with some American students in Florida a couple of nights ago, and it was great fun. It really was. And it's when you do that you realize just the power of this iPad in front of me is staggering. And by the way, I think that things may well develop on that front. Although, having said that, nothing will ever replace, he's getting very old now, but someone like Alfred Brendel coming to perform in Bristol or in London, or as I mentioned, Andreas Schiff already, or whoever, because there is something magic about a live concert, which can absolutely blow you away. I don't know if you're an opera buff, but well, okay. I was taken when I was a student, St Andrews, in my last weeks as a student. A mate of mine who subsequently became a musical agent said, right, you're going to come and see Die Meistersinger in Edinburgh with Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau in it. And I'd heard some Wagner overtures, but Die Meistersinger blew me away. I couldn't believe it. What, the overture, even today, all that recurring theme stays with me. The only mistake was at the first interval, I went and drank 2 pints of beer, which is a major mistake. We won't go into that.
Well, that's a top tip. Don't drink 2 pints of beer in the interval of Wagner. But so it sounds to me that also you think perhaps post-COVID, there'll be a renewed enthusiasm for the arts. I mean, because I completely agree with you and resonate with the fact that you can't beat the life experience. I agree, of course, it's great having these iPads and technological developments, but really actually still the idea of flying someone or traveling someone from abroad is still essential, because that level of artistry, that visceral element you get from being in the opera, wherever it might be, is something which you just can't replace.
That's exactly right. There's no two ways about it. It also works two ways, in that I think that, and here I'm just going to revert to what I do myself, and bear in mind I'm the crummiest amateur, but when I did pantomime, and you had 60 children on stage, and you had the principal parts, and latterly, my last one, I was the dame, and so on. And you got a community, and I have to be very careful the way I phrase this, but the children and the people involved in the pantomime in my local town here, well, it's wider than that, they came from all walks of life, really, really, really. And I don't want to be judgmental about jobs and what people do, but it really was. And it was a melting pot. And when you put a show on, and when you pull it off, even though it's a hammer full of rubbishy jokes and look behind and all that, and when you get a cheer and you bow at the end, and you know the audience have loved it, I don't actually know of a better hit. It's better than the finest wine. If you've pulled off a good performance, or you just played the flute superbly and you bow, you think, wow. And again, it's about human interaction, isn't it? The audience have loved it, the performers have loved it. And I always think that when you get into the arts, you can get totally bitten. And I suppose it's, as I said earlier, it's about human nature, isn't it? It's coded into us. It's probably the same reason that birds sing to each other, and you can tell when birds are enjoying it. I mean, I listen to pigeons in the morning; they're having a conversation, cool away.
Well, you can find the arts in many different ways, I'm sure, absolutely. I'm just going to go back to something which you said earlier, which I found quite intriguing. Was you talked about again, this is linking to internationalism, but the importance of the arts as a soft power. Do you think that we're perhaps losing our standing in the world in that respect, with having barriers to developing international cultural exchange, such as what's happening, say, with Brexit? And can London still conceivably claim, not to be London-centric necessarily, as a capital of culture for the world? Maybe Simon Rattle, moving from the LSO to Bavarian Radio Orchestra, is anticipating our decline. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I think it's a very, very real danger. I'm not sure that the government actually sees this. And it's funny because it's not a new thing. The British influence has been very big for a long time. I mean, look at the way Shakespeare has been translated and interpreted by composers since, for many, many years. We can all think of, various renditions of Macbeth or whatever and so on. So it is dangerous, and I worry about people moving, going away. And, when Neil McGregor, why he moved from London to Berlin is a worry. And you worry about this. And I don't know how to stop it. I think the best I can do is bang on about it. And also, I've got to be very careful that I don't get too highbrow and talk about Bach's chromatic Fantasia Fugue or the chaconne, the famous chaconne. I've got to talk about panto. I've got to talk about brass bands. I've got to talk about, pub quizzes, because arts comes in so many different forms. But what are arts all about? The arts are all about, and I'm repeating myself, it's about making people feel happier. You enjoy art because you enjoy art. You say, oh, that's a lovely picture. And you look at it long and gosh, that's beautiful. Gosh, that's a nice piece of music. Goodness me, that's a funny joke. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just within the artist community, we're certainly, our feeling is that we hope to be an important part of the recovery post-COVID, and to boost morale and to have those visceral feelings we were talking about earlier, which just can't be replaced, unfortunately, by interactions such as this. But so is there any way, and maybe it's the case of how the arts is valued by this government, within our country, is there any way of regaining that power? And as you say, maybe it's an economic argument demonstrating that soft power links to trade.
Well, I think first up, what government should think about, and it's quite good value for money, is once we get through all this, and once we've had enough injections to have some semblance of normal life, then I think there's a huge benefit in saying, right, here is a chunk of money for Bristol, or for West Oxfordshire, or for the Highlands of Scotland, or whatever. Go out there, have an arts festival, okay? Make it, not too highbrow, make it a bit of everything, okay? But there it is. Spend that money on performers, spend that money on venues, let's get things going and let's kickstart. Let's get the WRVS to help do the T's. Let's get, I don't know, any, and let's, by the way, there's a very good quartet from Slovakia. Let's get them in, they're good. And there's a lot of knowledge out there. Let's invite Neil McGregor to come back, from Berlin and do, perhaps, he's done 100 objects, he's done 101st one. Come and do the 102nd one. We challenge you to come to Caithness, to come to Truro, do a 102nd object, and tell us all about it. Simon Rattle, please come back and conduct something for us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And I hope Oliver Dowden considers that, because in the scheme of things, when they can throw, gosh, doesn't it make you wonder what austerity was all about? But that's a complete aside. That, 500 million, goodness me, what could you do with 100 million in terms of arts festivals all over the UK? Why don't we have a summer of arts festivals to re-kick, to say, hey, we've got through the pandemic, hey, let's enjoy life. And the thing is, when you spend that money, instead of spending it on benefits, you're spending it, putting it into people's pockets, you're bringing the money's spent locally in pubs, it's spent in businesses, it goes straight into the economy. This time through an arts pipe. That's something I'd like to push really hard.
Yeah, and I think certainly policy of that nature would be really encouraging. As you say, not only does it go straight into the artists, into the economy, but then there's that on ticket sales, there's the wider economy as well. I mean, there's a figure here of the arts and culture contribute 10.8 billion a year to the UK economy, and the sector contributes 2.8 billion a year into treasury and taxation. That's not including tourism, hospitality, all the other elements that go about it. There's a very strong argument there. And Sam Mendes, for example, last year, the director, was championing the film industry and theatre and saying he's not asking for simply a handout, it's an investment. So when you think about investing in local regional theatre, those actors, Daniel Craig, Ralph Fiennes and Dame Judi Dench, didn't just turn out of nowhere and do the James Bond films. They were at those regional theatres building up their career to what they are today, and the revenue we get from using London for films, whatever it might be, is considerable.
I had a very funny meeting with Netflix doing the DC Brexit, and they would tell me all the good things they do and so on. Channel 4 do the same, BBC do the same, absolutely understandable. And they said, and they'd obviously done the research. They knew I represented the top of Scotland. And they said, we're terribly sorry, we've done an awful lot in the UK filming The Crown. And I said, oh, yes, I know about The Crown. But we haven't filmed anything, we haven't actually filmed anything in your area. And I was able to say, oh, yes, you have. Because the first episode of the third series was filmed in the village of Libeston, the village of Dunbeath and Caithness. And by the way, Lord Mountbatten was blown up in Libeston, not in the west of Ireland. And they, oh, did we? Oh, gosh. And I was able to say, turning to your point, and you wouldn't believe what that did for the local B&B, because having you guys descend, spend your money, go in the B&B, oh, we better go and have a pint in the pub and so on. That was a really good, not big in the scheme of things, but in a tiny little village like Libeston, bloody good news. And the locals loved it. They were thrilled that they were going to be in the crowd,
I'm sure. Well, I think it's coming back to the point about perhaps how, not necessarily the government, but also UK more broadly, how they value culture. I mean, the German government, for example, gives more to Berlin arts organisations alone, and the whole of Arts Council of England is able to distribute to all the arts organisations in England. So that's quite a stark contrast, and does that demonstrate how we value culture? And it's constantly diminishing, or do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. And we're a very strange nation, When Handel came over to write in the 18th century, I think he made the observation that they're a funny lot, the English, he said. They really like loud, clangy, bang, bang type music, which is sort of slightly true about us Brits, which is why, the last night, the proms. And whereas, there's a famous cartoon, I think, I don't remember who did it, of a German audience looking at a quartet and going, oh, das ist gut, ja. And a British audience watching a quartet, and they're sound asleep. So we've got to guard against that. And I think we're funny about culture and the arts because we think it's sort of slightly not. It's not roast beef, it's not quite proper. I think that's a danger in that. And I think, and yet, once you get the stuff going, we love it. We absolutely love it. So I think we've got to be more open about how important the arts are to our lives and say what I've just said about how it's part of happiness. But also we've got to get the government to understand this. I think Oliver Dowden, as Secretary of State, I think he does get it. The rumour is that he may be promoted to slightly more important, although I don't, that's to denigrate the arts to say that, but we may lose him. But then there are, and it's not fair to say this, but there are some people in all parties who really are not supporters of the arts, and that's a great shame. What do we do? As I said before, we just got to bang the drum and go on about it. And in my going on about it, I've got to, I've got to look not to use an expression, not too highbrow. I've said that already, yeah. But and just getting things to happen. I'll give you an example. Some years ago, when I was in the Scottish Parliament, we have a very successful traditional Scottish Scottish music. Based on my old school, Tane Academy, which is called the Gizen Briggs. The Gizen Briggs is named after a particularly treacherous bit of sand just off the coast here. And they are really, really good. They're absolutely fantastic. They play beautiful Highland airs and strathspeys and jigs and reels and so on. And they're hugely successful around here. And I thought, right, now in the Scottish Parliament, if I do nothing else, I was on the committee that oversaw the building of the Parliament, and I took a lot of flack. In fact, I nearly lost my seat. So when it was all finished and they had the opening with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh to come and do it, I went to the presiding officer, who's David Steele, and said, I want my local band, these children, all at school, to come play because they play beautifully. And I sent him a recording, and he said, they do play well. And I said, okay, no, it's not possible. And I said, now look here, I've been through hell. I nearly lost my seat. My price. So anyway, I got them in, and they went down an absolute smash hit. It was really good. And the Queen walked past and stopped and listened to them and said, what's that you just played? And they said, oh, it's a slow air called Leaving Stour. Stour's Northwest Highlands, little village. And she said, would you play it again?
Oh, wow.
I know. And that they now call the Royal Request. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this that if you get them out there and get them performing, or if let's do something completely different. If you get a steel band to come across from the Caribbean and put them in Aberdeen in the middle of the street when it's not raining, and they start playing, people go, wow, hey, that's cool. It's about having the bottle to put the performance on, and you'd be surprised how people react.
Well, I would say to that, in terms of the bottle, there's also the risk involved in putting things on. And you mentioned how about this, distributing local and regional funding or support festivals. I'd like to talk about sort of the long to medium term in a minute, but in the short term, within your DCMS remit as spokesperson, it's also sport as well. Now, how can Premier League football matches happen, whereas concert halls, a controlled environment? In fact, there was a study in Germany, the concert house in Dortmund only came out last week, that said concert venues are not places for infection. How can football happen, but concerts in a controlled environment can't? Is it just simply that money talks?
Yeah, I think it's a certain amount of that. There's also this issue one we've been pursuing. You probably don't know this, but through the APPG and also through my DCMS team in the Lords, as well as myself, we've been pursuing the idea of insurance.
Because yes, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
I was approached directly by the son of a friend of mine who works for promoting music, and he said, "Look, we can't get insurance cover, and yet the government can underwrite the insurance, and can actually do quite well. Actually, can make a few bob. And if you set a start date, an assumed safe date to start." Perhaps if you said, I don't know, 1st of July, I can't remember that was the date we thought we'd try. And to try and push that, say, come on, you do underwrite insurance for other things. So why not do it for music? And that is work in progress. I hope we can persuade them to do that, because I think if we got that right, we could really start to unlock things.
Yeah, it was something which was, it was on the radio over the weekend about that very thing. And I gather that Germany, Austria, Switzerland have similar models of government-backed insurance indemnity schemes, and I gather the film industry, the UK government, there's already a precedence there for doing that. So hopefully, as you say, it'll be realised with live performance. The likes of Glastonbury, I've never been championing it, and others. So is there a timeline on that?
I'm trying to remember where we got to. I think I think what we've done is we have written to GCMS, or is it the Treasury? Anyway, it happened last week. So we've put forward a proposal saying we think this is what should be done. And it's a pretty hot topic of discussion. I have to also pay tribute to Jane Bonham Carter in the Lords, who's been a big help with this one. And she gets the arts in particular and so on. And actually, not on this particular one, but in other forms of support for people who've lost out during the pandemic, we have been quite lucky in that we have now actually got Jesse Norman, who's not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he's one down, but he as a minister is now actually meeting with us and saying, look, if you can come up with costed proposals as to how we could reach out to people who missed out and how it would be safe from fraud, then I'm very happy to put my Treasury officials onto it to think about it. And we have just literally made the first of those proposals. This is not on the insurance of performances. But what I'm saying is that we've started a dialogue there on a sort of parallel front. And I think the aim is to do the same with the insurance issue. I'm pretty certain in my own mind that would break the logjam.
That's really encouraging. I think in some ways we could look at, say, let's talk about the Cultural Recovery Fund in terms of that when that first came out, the 1.57 billion as a headline, extremely generous. I suppose when you compare it to Transport for London having a 6-month bailout of 1.8 billion, maybe not quite so much. But what seems contradictory, I mean, Classical Music Magazine put out a survey, and it was released last week, that said only 20% of the arts feel that the distribution of it has actually been very fair. There was a big pomp and circumstance at the beginning about how Oliver Dowden is saying we should protect the crown jewels, but many of which actually are having to sell off their assets, like the Royal Opera House selling the Hockley painting before they can actually receive any subsidy. And there's lots of people, well, organisations more generally, but also individual musicians who are freelance self-employed, who are just slipping through the net. And so your conversations with the Treasury, then, does that imply that they're very much aware of that and trying to resolve that? Yes.
The freelance one is exactly where one of the issues we've come straight at them on it and say, by the very definition of the way they work, they haven't been furloughed, they haven't received anything at all, and they're having to flog the car to live. And yes, that's in the proposal we've made. It's freelance in particular, which of course covers, obviously all sorts of freelancers, but the musicians are in there. And some of the most compelling evidence, as I said before, came from the musicians, like my cellist who's having to clean the school. It is the erosion of the product which is so dangerous. And if we reduce in any way the quality of what we're doing, and again, I just take you back. Why should they have to sell a Hockley? Because the money you give the arts is spent in the economy of the UK. The vast proportion of it is. Yes, okay, some will go overseas, but then overseas come here and they raise money here. So, that was the reciprocal nature of it. They could be paid in the country they went to without a problem. And I think, oddly enough, it may seem just to digress slightly, I think that I'm not without hope. I think in the government, oddly enough, Michael Gove, from my conversations with him, gets this one. He's quite a thoughtful guy, actually, and it may be that he appreciates that there are others who I don't think get it at all. But so the way I run it is the APPG on the gaps in support. I was very gratified that I got all sorts of MPs from all sorts of parties joining. Esther McVeigh, former cabinet minister, is a joint chair with me. And the reason I think we can advance it is if you try and not get too party political, but show that we're all working together from different parties to try and advance this. And I think the same, if we get it right, can be done with the arts. I mean, if you take Giles Watling, the Tory MP for the coast of Essex, I'm trying to remember the name, it's Clacton, and he is an ex-actor. Tracy Brabin, Labour, ex-actress, or actor, I should say. We don't have actresses anymore. And they can talk on the same language about it. And Giles has been doing good work about saying, well, hang on, maybe theatre's in danger. And so if we work on a broad front and try and be able to show that we're for the wider good, that I think can be a message for government.
Well, it's great to hear there's a cross-party consensus there and a working body in order to champion the arts. I mean, would you say just going back to the Cultural Recovery Fund, would you say that's been successful? Would you say the furlough scheme has been successful for the arts? When you consider the South Bank Centre unfortunately had to let go 70% of its staff. I don't know, in this last summer, I was hearing about the Theatre Royal in Plymouth, which is a regional venue, fantastic commissioning venue, has got rid of all of its artistic team. And that's tragic. I mean, there's always going to be things that slip through the net, but overall, would you say it's been successful?
Yeah, okay. Well, first up, I'm not going to slag off the furlough scheme because that has saved a lot of lives. But in terms of impact on the arts, no. I think there's been a missed opportunity here. In all our discussions with Treasury, I think we have to rather sadly accept the fact that we can't get things backdated. But if we could sort out the freelance problem, at least it would now. I mean, they've had almost a year of this, Don't need to tell you that. But yes, I think it's extraordinary the way it's been missed out, and I don't quite understand why or how that ever came to be. And as you rightly say, Germany takes such a very different attitude. Maybe it's no accident they produce so many great composers. I don't know. Anyway, we've got to put it right. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you. Well, just to move on slightly, and I suppose it does link to funding for arts organisations, is that within this environment of actually just having such a challenging funding environment at the moment, do you feel that perhaps pre-COVID commitments to diversity inclusivity initiatives from arts organisations are perhaps might be neglected, and that also linking to learning and participation activities and music education? Is there a danger that those really fundamental elements for the future of our industry are being neglected at all, and what can we do to combat that?
Yeah, I think there is danger. And let me give you one example, which is that I'm very worried about with, of course, schools can't operate the normal way. But what does that mean for people picking up the violin for the first time? What does it mean for the very basics of starting in the school orchestra? Probably as Nicola Benedetti did. She probably was been taught earlier than that. But that's the way I came to music, was actually to avoid playing football because I was such rubbish. I discovered that Miss McRae could do violin lessons on the very period that clashed with football. So I then learned to play the fiddle for that reason, which is not the best reason. And I wasn't a particularly good fiddler, but I did lead the seconds in the end, but never mind. So, and there was a principle in Scottish schools for many, many years that musical instruction would be free, wouldn't be charged for. And the real worry as budgets go completely wonky and cash becomes short is a bit like selling the Hockney, but then who knows, they might start to charge for instrumental instruction. That would then instantly mean that a whole lot of kids, because their parents can't afford it, would lose out. I'll just give you one other odd example. I've done many different jobs in my time. I worked in the Shetlands as a kitchen porter, which is the lowest of the low, when I was a student. And there was a guy who was a cleaner, and he was called Dave Berry. He was an old bloke. And that was me being a kitchen porter, being shouted at by the chefs. There was Dave with his mop and his bucket going around cleaning. Dave could whistle. He could whistle like you have never heard. And I, being instant classical, said, I bet you, can you whistle the theme from, whatever? And he could. And you think, sure, I don't believe this, Death and the Maiden. Wow. He'd never, ever, he couldn't read music. And you thought, what a talent, what a shame. He should have played the flute. And yet, obviously, from his background, he'd never had that opportunity. He was an old bloke then, and I'm talking way, way back. And he thought, what a tragedy. So I'm a great believer in everybody should attain their maximum potential. Yeah, and I think that musical instruction is, I'm digressing again, I'm an awful man for going
No, it's absolutely fine.
But I think that's part and parcel. And so I think that the sacred rule of equal access to developing the arts could be in danger as a result of COVID, because budgets are going to be so hellish.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe I don't want to generalize the arts community more broadly, but there's perhaps a danger that arts organizations are really leading the front in providing a music provision. And also without it being a real focus in the curriculum, and that's led by government policy. And actually it feels that perhaps the arts are isolated in that.
Mm.
And what can we do to get more support and more consensus within the curriculum to demonstrate that the arts is really important? I mean, I'll give you an example. The City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra are starting up a school. I think next academic year, it's an academy where every single pupil will be given free music tuition. And they hope to demonstrate in 4 to 5 years' time, actually, there's measurable difference in the academic performance by virtue of having music tuition. And hopefully there's some measurable data then to demonstrate that point.
Yes, I think there's a huge amount. You're absolutely right about that. And that was, when I was a councillor donkeys years ago, that was one of the arguments I used to always deploy about why we must maintain free instrumental instruction, was it did lead to a parallel improvement in other subjects. Quite why that is, it's very hard to know, isn't it? It's just the way the human brain works, I guess. They do say, actually, oddly enough, within the Highlands of Scotland context, that if you learn Gaelic in a Gaelic medium school, that improves attainment. So maybe it's the mind exercise. And you know how people of my age are strongly advised to do the crossword, do the Sudoku, otherwise you'll lose all your faculties. No, I think there's something about that. Mental exercise keeps you going.
I'm also shifting gears all over the place, so we're both at it. But I want to talk about culture wars today. And is it fair to say the BBC is perhaps marginalised to a certain extent by the current government? Is there, with the accusations of maybe a left-wing bias, is there danger of there being no longer any political independence for the BBC, with, for example, Richard Sharp, a Tory donor, about to be appointed as BBC chairman? Is there any danger of the, as I say, the political independence of the BBC, or do you have any, are there any concerns about that at all?
You've touched a raw nerve there. Yes, I think there's a huge danger. Absolutely. And this is something that I talk about a lot with my colleagues, the peers, and Jane Bonham-Carter is really, really big in it. Look, the BBC is one of the great institutions, and I've got an excellent new person working for me, Mohammed, and we gave Mohammed only at the end of last week. I said, right, Mohammed, your project is to look at the BBC, spend as much time as you can on it, work out what were the great benefits of the BBC. Let's write something on it. Let's work towards a blog, maybe a piece in the House magazine. And I was saying, here's a couple of steers. In the 1926 general strike, Lord Reith became under huge pressure. I've studied history from the government, Baldwin's government, but in particular from Winston Churchill, to bloody well, hammer these miners, sort it out. He was publishing something, Churchill was, called the British Gazette, which was a real rag, which was to smash the unions. So, he may be the great savior in the Second World War, but there's a past in Winston's life as well. And Lord Reith, to his complete credit, said, no, I will not do this. The BBC is independent. We will not go one way for the government or one way or the other or whatever. And he was really unpopular on this occasion with the Conservative Party. But let's also remember that there were times when Tony Blair's government were absolutely furious with the BBC, particularly at the time of Iraq, particularly at the time that Dr. Kelly, I think that was his name, wasn't it, committed suicide. And the independence of the BBC is absolutely colossally important. And then I said to Mohammed, the other example is, think during the Second World War, how the BBC helped keep the nation together. And I said, think too about, have a look at the Foreign Service, soft power. And then I said, finally, we should take a really close look at what the BBC has been doing during COVID in terms of schedules that keep, the morale of the country up when people have been in a pretty black place. So we're developing an argument that points out that it's fundamental. Auntie, the beep, is fundamental to the way we do things in Britain. It's like the National Health Service. It's something that's really important. And I think some of the proposals emanating from the Tory party as to how we're going to sort them out are very, very, very worrying indeed. And it's that side. I'm not saying every Tory is a bad person, because there are good Tories, there are good people in every party. But that tendency is an ugly one. And it has to be avoided at all costs. But the attack is there. And they would love to pull one over the BBC and to emasculate them. And I think it's colossally important that that's defended. I mean, I think that, where you see, and even in the Scottish context, they've been under attack, as you probably well know, in that Alex Salmond became convinced that the BBC was out to stuff Scottish independence. I don't think so. I would say their reporting was straight down the middle, dead fair. I mean, I've been given a really hard time, and I deserved it, when I've been interviewed on the past. I've made big mistakes. And, I can think of BBC names who've really, we've got Jamie now, right, bang, go for him. But I deserved it. I'm a politician, if you can't take that stuff. But no, they were fair. They were fair.
I don't want to demonstrate too much bias here, but I think the BBC is also the same broadcaster that had Nick Griffin on Question Time. And to say it's got a left-leaning bias, it gave Nigel Farage a huge platform during Brexit when, and before that, when UKIP had no members of parliament. I can't think of another political party that had the same coverage that he did with no MPs. So it's, I suppose the danger, and it sounds like it's a very real danger from what you're saying, is the erosion of the BBC's maybe public service ethos, and there's more commercialisation is also perhaps there as well. And also more broadly within the media landscape, the launch of GB News with a right-leaning, or almost Fox News style from what's been anticipated, broadcast, 24-hour news broadcaster, which might make our country even more divided. Is that another sort of danger?
Yes, it's absolutely. No, you can see that. And there's a gentleman living in Australia, a very old man, who, I won't name him, I can't remember his name. Might sound like Rupert Murdoch, but never mind.
Has he got anything Scottish about it?
And I think these things have to be guarded as being absolutely precious to Britain. And if nothing else as a country, I think we do have a proud record for even hundreds of years of being fair-minded. I mean, after all, it was the UK, for whatever statues have been pushed into the sea of slave people, it was the UK that actually eventually said, we're going to ban the slave trade. And we did do that. And that bit of history can't be taken away. It was Britain who said, no, hang on. Hitler's, wait, what? This guy, he's out of order, invading Poland. So let's not be ashamed of it. But it's all about the sort of fairness and that quality of decency. And Churchill raging when he was put out in 1945, but actually recognizing that, well, that's democracy, isn't it? And how that compares to recent events on the other side of the pond.
Well, in fact, that's an interesting segue, because today we are talking on the day of Joe Biden's inauguration. And I just wanted to talk to you briefly about cancel culture. And so Trump has been banned from Twitter, from all sorts of different social media platforms. Where do you stand on perhaps on the debate of free speech versus also the power of these independent social media companies? And are they publishers? Do they have the right to be stopping Trump from broadcasting wherever he wants to broadcast? I know that is one of the most
fascinating questions of the last few days. And people saying, well, hang on, to shut down the President of the United States. What is this? I personally think I should be very interested to see what the government's about to come forward with on online harms. I think this is colossally important. Already the lobbying started. And you wonder, is Nick Clegg suddenly going to appear? Jamie, I don't know you, but could I have a word with you?
Is he COO of Facebook, is that right? Or deputy CEO or something like that?
I don't know.
He's definitely a senior figure.
Well, I know. Have I time? Am I holding you back?
No, please carry on. Yeah.
Well, I remember very well when I was a great friend of Charles Kennedy's. I'll come back to the subject, okay? But I remember I had been his chairman, and we were chums. I was a member of Scottish Parliament, and when he died, the media sort of went, ITV, BBC, they interviewed me, absolutely. And I did telly and what was he like and so on. And that was fine and so on. And then the BBC said, can we interview you just before the funeral? And being Highland, I said, no, that's not appropriate. I'm not the day of the funeral. I'm not going to do that. Sorry, can't do it. And they were a bit, And so after the funeral, there's Nick Clegg. It was decent of him to turn up. So I went up to him and said, you don't know me. I'm Jamie Stone. And he said, I know exactly who you are. And turned his back on. Ooh, crikey, what's all this? And then Alistair Campbell, of all people, came up and said, "Oh, Jamie, we haven't met Alistair Campbell." I was going, "Oh, how do you know who I am?" He said, "I heard you were good. I heard you this morning on the radio. Excellent." I didn't do radio. And then another person said, "Oh, I heard you on the radio. Good." I went, "What is this?" So eventually, after a day or two of this, I rang up the BBC and said, "Look here, I didn't do an interview." No. But we broadcast it. I said, what do you mean? Well, we said, well, we used a bit of an outtake that you did for the telly. We turned it into radio, and we put that out. It went down quite well. I said, which bit did you use? And I said, the bit where you had said you'd been having a cup of tea with Charles, and you'd both been talking about the bedroom tax and saying it was absolutely rubbish, it was iniquitous, and that Charles, yes, was going to vote against it. And Nick had heard this driving to the funeral and was clearly absolutely furious with me for having mentioned it.
Well, wasn't Charles Kennedy also one of the few Lib Dem MPs who opposed the coalition as well?
Yes, he did. Yeah. So, but that's complete just an anecdote. But Nick I was on his radar, all right. Public enemy number one. You know? Anyway, yeah, I think that we'll see what comes out of online harms. We'll see what the government comes up with.
Sorry, could you dig a bit deep? Online harms, what does that refer to exactly?
Well, this is just controlling, just what you're talking about. I mean, you know, is it the New Statesman or was it the Times? Had a picture of the dome of the Capitol being held up by Twitter, Facebook, all the way around, see? And it's about, are these guys too powerful? And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the fear is that they may use very clever, behind the scenes lobbying of ministers. Actually, it's all right, just leave it. Whereas I think some of us feel that no, it's not all right when kids can access stuff that they shouldn't be able to. That maybe the government in France will come forward with a regulatory regime. We'll see what that comes up with. My own view is that the way to do it, and shutting down, I think the time probably had come to shut Trump down. But I think that long before, there should have been more warnings associated with the tweet, more warnings with the Facebook post, saying this is not, there are facts that absolutely. And, had that been done with, what's it called, QAnon, a lot more. Let's be quite fair about this. I make a speech, it's pretty dodgy. Twitter might say, well, that's Jamie's opinion, but, do you see what I'm saying? So I think that the sort of health warning thing should be better put. But I'm not sure. I'm not pretend to be an expert in this. I would be very interested to see what other people suggest.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And in Twitter's defense, I think they did give warnings or started to retract some of his tweets and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's one of the debates of our time, I would say.
There's just the other slight aspect of social media, which is worth remembering, is that also, however, because people can take screenshots, you can catch people with social media. You can catch your baddie. And I think some of the guys that the FBI are rounding up right now for breaking into the Capitol, the social media stuff is crucial to that.
Yeah, I'm sure. As a segue, digital more generally, do you, and I'm going to bring it back to the arts again more closely, do you think technology will influence the arts and vice versa? I know we spoke a little bit, say, about Zoom, but just more broadly, and actually, do we have anything to worry about with the likes of Huawei or with AI technology replacing jobs or whatever it might be in the future? Or is it something we should very much be embracing?
No, we do have to be careful. Of course, Huawei takes me. This is not really our topic for today, but it takes me into national security. There is no doubt that the Chinese are buying up an awful lot of stuff, which is not really what we want. And so I think we have to be careful. But on technology, there is this one great potential, which is that as I said, I'm on my iPad talking to you. If I, as an MP, have to get in touch with government departments, which we do all the time, as likely as not, they're at home because of COVID and they're working through, which kind of proves the argument that you could decentralize an awful lot of jobs out of the big conurbations to someone like where I represent. I mean, why would you not have some aspects of advice done from the far north of Scotland, provided, and the connectivity is reaching that point where it's good enough to do that, or very nearly now. So there's an opportunity to restructure the way we work. And my son works in finance, and he's been working from his home in East London. And I think they have to reach a point as a company to say, well, we don't need to have such a big office, do we? We could do a lot smaller. And we could then do an awful lot of people, providing this human contact when we meet in some way. But we don't need to have X people in the same building. But then that dislocates the market. You find property becoming empty. You could find big offices becoming empty. Then we'd have to have a sort of policy of moving people in. But to go back to the arts, I think that the quality of digital transmission of to go back to Angela Hewitt playing
one of our artists.
One of our artists is fantastic, and I can now, if I'm in a really boring meeting, I can just put Angela Hewitt on the headphones and just nod wisely at what my colleagues are saying. But actually, I'm listening to the Busoni transcription of the Takalia. I don't know if you're a pianist or an organist.
I'm not. No, that's a good tip, though.
Yeah, so it's great, and it's not stereo, but it's very nearly stereo because and it's not far away at all. So there's a great opportunity, but then we've got to also get people into listening to the music much more.
Absolutely. Just to finish off, this is not arts related, but just it does have actually repercussions, say, when we're thinking about touring to Japan, actually in the very, hopefully to the near future, and within your remit of sports within DCMS. Do you think the Olympics will happen? I mean, today the Times suggested not. Hugh Robertson, the chairman of the British Olympic Association, was quite vehement on the Today programme today, saying it would definitely go ahead. Doesn't seem to be any conclusive element, but
I think it's the job of everyone to sort of say, yeah, it'll definitely go ahead. And that's what he's doing, just as Nicola Sturgeon saying there'll definitely be a Scottish election in May, just as Boris is saying there'll definitely be local elections in England and Wales in May. Just as they tend to do that, don't they? But I've been saying to my Scottish Liberal Democrat leader, Willie Rennie, that if we hit the end of January with COVID still as bad as it is at the moment, or not much better, then if you're a betting man, it's not so likely we'll have an election at the beginning of May. Why am I telling you that? I can understand why you've got to try and present the most optimistic picture, and you can't go around saying it's all death and disaster. But I think being realistic, I think the Olympics are in jeopardy. Let's hope they happen, but I wouldn't bet it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for your time. One thing I wanted to mention also is that our director, co-founder Jasper Parrott, is a big advocate for the book by Peter Wohlleben called The Hidden Life of Trees. I don't know if you recommend. I'm coming full circle with your gardening hobby here. I don't know if you know it, but Jasper has been sort of waxing lyrical about the book, and also it's amazing about the sort of infinite and often invisible interlocking of trees and fungi, and actually how the arts in our society perhaps has a similar role. So anyway, I thought I'd throw in that book recommendation and
thank you very much. I think it's true, and it's really weird the way that things you did or I've done in the past in the arts suddenly comes full circle. And somebody said to me the other day, wait a minute, if I remember right at St Andrews, weren't you in Endgame? And I said, oh God, this, Endgame by Samuel Beckett. And a mate of mine and I on a Sunday were having a pint, and we were walking down North Street in St Andrews, and there was a sign that said, auditions now. And this mate said, these arty people, they paint their fingernails all a bit weird. And we were half cut, so we went in and did the audition for a lark, just two lads and I got a part.
Fantastic.
And that launched me on the stage at St Andrews University as an amateur actor, but I loved it. And it's funny that it should come back to bite me all these years later. Really, really weird.
Yeah.
Hey, should I show you something?
Yes, please do.
Did you hear that noise?
I did, yeah.
It's Trump.
Don't touch the hair.
Don't touch the hair. There you go.
Wow, Jamie, many thanks indeed for your time. As I say, it's great to have someone who speaks so passionately for the arts, and to know that you're working in many different areas to improve the lives of artists and arts organisations more broadly. Thank you also to Aisha Hassan, Fiona Livingston, and our sound editor, Merlyn Thomas. Our theme music is composed by Robert Cochrane. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure to check out all the other episodes from the Culture Bar, with topics ranging from art sponsorship to the future of music technology and international cultural exchange. We've had guests from the BBC, the British Museum, and even a former football professional referee. And to get all of that and more, please subscribe. See you next time.